We're going to be going through the art of growing a personal brand. My goal is always to make things simple and tangible and useful as possible, so that people feel like they can actually take this away and start to execute pretty much right away. My name is Elfried Samba, in case you didn't know. And what I do is I help brands and people grow through community-driven marketing. If you had to summarize what I do in a sentence, this is it, right? And obviously, we're talking about personal branding. So, in the true nature of personal branding, I thought I'll talk you through my story and leave a little bit of clues in that journey so that you can see some reference points of where I got my inspiration, and hopefully you can adapt it to yourself. And then we're going to go straight into the tangible so you can make sure that you can leave with some tactical, almost like know-how, and you can execute and send some screenshots through. So, as mentioned with my story, I was born in the Democratic Republic of Congo, so right in Central Africa, so nice and warm by the equator. So you can imagine my shock when my parents moved us to the UK and we saw snow for the first time, right? We didn't know anybody and nobody knew us. But then the one thing that I had was the whole like immigrant mentality of wanting to make sure that I make my parents proud and I make the most of my golden ticket. So what you tend to do when you want to go into your path is you tend to look for references at home first and foremost. So that's exactly what I did. So I looked at my dad, and my dad was a doctor. And all my life, I thought I was going to be a doctor like my dad. And then I realized that I was shit at science, right? So I had to figure something else out, right? And I was like, okay, so being a doctor is not for me. That's just not going to work. Let me go over to my mom and see what I can get some inspiration from there. Now, my mom was an entrepreneur. She's never worked for anybody. She's very, very creative. She's always looking for new opportunities and ways to almost like grow her own business. And I thought that maybe I would be more like my mom. How my simple brain works is that I like to look for references of people that have achieved this at the highest degree. So I want to know my path and whether I want to go through the same path, but then also for inspiration. What I realized is that I needed people that felt close to home, but I could understand and feel like. So the first person that I stumbled on was a guy called Steve Jobs. And actually, how I found out about Steve Jobs was the iPhone keynote in 2007 changed my life forever. As I said, I thought I was going to be a doctor this whole time. And then Steve Jobs came in and started talking about this iPhone thing and basically simplifying a very complicated piece of tech in a way that my simple brain could understand. And talking about iPod, when he said that phrase, 1,000 songs in your pocket, I realized there the importance of storytelling and making sure that you can humanize very complicated piece of work. So going back to the whole Einstein theory, if you can't explain something to a 7-year-old and you don't really understand it, that was my very first lesson, not just about marketing, but also about personality and making sure that people leave excited and feeling your energy and excited about how you deliver things. The next was I heard about this guy called Mark Zuckerberg. And the reason why I heard about him is one, I was using his app called Facebook to reconnect with my friends back home, but I didn't know that it was ran by a 21-year-old. And then I saw the headline of the 21-year-old saying no to $1 billion from Yahoo. Now, side note for a second, I don't know about you guys, but if I told my Congolese mom that I was going to say no to $1 billion, she would have shipped me back home on the first flight, right? That got me really excited about where the future was going and the whole aspect of connecting people together online. And that's where I started to put the two together. Social media marketing, that's probably where the world is going. And that's probably what my calling is going to be. But in case you haven't realized, none of these guys look like me, right? So although it was great to get references from them, I didn't truly believe that I could actually take things that far because I'd never seen anybody like me do it before. So I had to get a final reference point. And here comes Jay-Z, right? Jay-Z was one of the first hip hop artists that you would translate business knowledge in musical form. The line, women lie, men lie, numbers don't, made me really, really excited about the collaboration of data and art, right? So art and science goes hand in hand. A lot of people think that you should just be an artist, but ignore the numbers. But at the end of the day, art is opinion, numbers is what actually is definitive, right? So I realized there that I had to, for me to be able to make sure that I got my credit from an art form perspective or from a marketing perspective, I needed to drive results. And that was the final piece to my Avengers Infinity Ring puzzle, if you will. So obviously, armed with these references, I took this enthusiasm to university. And I actually got marked down during my dissertation for not having any references for the fact that I thought that small to medium-sized businesses and individuals were able to leverage social media to compete against the larger competitors. After they told me that there was no references, my whole goal was to become that reference. And you can clearly tell that my doctor dad was excited about the idea that his son was going to be tweeting for a living instead of going to become a doctor, right? Very grateful support. But going on to that, I thought, you know what? If the academics don't understand it, let's go into the entrepreneurial world. The idea is that no businesses were forward thinking enough to be able to execute. The only person that I saw that was actually speaking my language was this guy called Gary Vaynerchuk that was yelling at me on a YouTube video about the whole concept of jab, 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 right hook, which is all about giving value up front before you ask for anything. And I thought, you know what? That's really, really exciting. He's speaking in my language. I must not be crazy. And it's also gave me a framework for how to start to build my own community. So I thought, where would I start? So at this time, as I mentioned, I did not have the looks for Instagram. I did not have the production capability for YouTube. I wasn't nerdy enough for LinkedIn. And that's where I decided to start my jabs. And my jab started because I figured out or I heard about this company called Gymshark that was run by two 19-year-olds that were driving Audi R8s across Birmingham city center. And I was like, I love the brand. I love what they stand for. They understand the power of social. Maybe I can throw enough jabs to get their attention and maybe they can get me a job. And obviously, I added Ben, who is the founder of Gymshark, and the rest of the team on LinkedIn. And I slowly started to see members of the team engaging with my posts. Then a few months later, this is my first day at Gymshark, at the Gymshark office. And I didn't know what was ahead of me, but I actually posted about it on Instagram saying, had an awesome first day at Gymshark HQ. Looking forward to creating some insane experiences. Watch this space. Cue video montage over here. So this was my time at Gymshark over 7 years. And also, we created some great headlines, building the brand through personal branding of Ben, social media, influencer marketing, and paid. We got an honorable mention by Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg on the earnest call, how we utilized paid media. We got ranked on Forbes for our use of influencer marketing. Ben's face is obviously everywhere because we made sure that we focused on humanizing the brand and having him at the center of it. And really, the brand went from like nothing to stardom very, very quickly. Now, obviously, Jay-Z said numbers don't lie, and this is all cute. So, what does that actually mean from a numbers perspective? So, in the 7 years that I was at Gymshark, we went from 24 employees to 1,000, and from 1 million followers across all social platforms to 20 million. And we went from an 8 million pound business to a 1.4 billion pound business. All of this through using personal branding and building a community around the brand, right? This demonstrates the ROI of this thing if you can get it right. And finally, my dad was happy. And not only did he have one Samba working at Gymshark, he actually had two. He became the talk of the town at his practice because all the young doctors, one, they loved Gymshark. Two, they started to love my personal brand and followed me on LinkedIn, and they loved Ben too. So it just shows that it can even make your parents become the heroes of where they work if you can get this right? So obviously this is great. And as I mentioned earlier, me and Ben went on this journey together. But then, although this was great from a Gymshark perspective, I was really almost like motivated to be a reference point for more people that came from a working background or came from a underrepresented community to see that you can actually go from employee to also becoming a successful business person. And obviously, I was speaking to Ben about this, and he said, well, as well as me wanting to get involved in the day-to-day of creativity, why don't you be visible and go back on LinkedIn? Maybe you can story share over there because obviously when I was working at Gymshark, I didn't have any time for building my brand. So I stopped. And then I went back onto it. And then the rest was history. I put a post out. So I was putting loads of different posts about like my journey, et cetera, et cetera. But then it was when I decided to say, let me start to post things that are meaningful to me, that matter to me and matter to people that I know are almost like one value or unspoken. I put this post out about the fact that representation matters, and it went crazy. I think it got about 20 million impressions at the end, 220,000 likes, 1.8K comments. If anything, it was one of the first real viral posts on the platform. And I think I got like 30,000 followers overnight. right? And I thought, you know what? Maybe there's something that I can do with this, right? And I decided to pursue my dream of creating my own business and also being a reference point. And I left Gymshark. So after 7 years, I was feeling a little bit like Hermione in Prisoner of Azkaban. I knew what was going to happen. Yeah, we were winning, but I wanted to challenge myself and create really further my personal brand and also grow a business around it. We've worked with some clients that you've never heard of before, which has been super cool since then. And obviously, it's been a crazy ride, but a lot of people are really, really shocked by the fact that we've been able to build a business so quickly without a sales team, with a lean team, and using nothing but LinkedIn and personal branding, right? And the cool thing about that is my account got listed as the second most influential LinkedIn page globally, which is phenomenal. My mom loved that. She's framed it on her fridge, which is super cool. But then also, I got mentioned, I'm not going to say this is good company or bad company, but I got mentioned as the fifth most influential person across in social media across all platforms. My bank account doesn't quite marry up, but at least we're on the list, right? So that's the list of the most influential people on social in 2024. And that's building their personal brand not only allowed me to be on fancy lists, but it's put me on some of the craziest stages around. If you look at the top left, I'm on a panel with Dame Jessica Ennis, who's a British Olympian that got a couple of gold medals. Gary Neville, who played for Manchester United and won like 12 trophies. And then you have me with a hat next to them. I don't know what the hell I'm doing there, right? 5 years on LinkedIn, was able to generate 500 million impressions, 9 million reactions, over 350,000 followers. And I talked about some of the stats that ranked over there. This is just to showcase what's possible if you really pursue this thing and if you learn the blueprints we're going to talk about today. So enough about me. It's great. I wanted to give you guys the stars and the moon so you guys know where you can go. Now let's start from day one and make it all about you, right? So this is when everyone's going to start to get their notepads out and get ready to hear the tangibles for how you can do the same or even further. I actually want people to go much further than what I've been able to do because we're just in the early stages. One big thing that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about is the fact that it's important to market in the year that you live in. Don't look for, although it's great to look for references points from like the years before, but really should be keeping your ears to the ground to how we are doing business today. And the way that we're doing business today is that it's personal, right? There's so much noise out there. There's so many people trying to get your attention, and people tend to gravitate to people that they know, trust, and understand, right? So it's not just about what you sell, it's about who you connect, what you stand for, and how you help others grow. If you're going into business right now, you need to be thinking about how you make yourself more personal, especially if you want to scale. Brands that don't thrive are those that don't get noticed. The ones that actually do the best, they aim to build trust, spark conversations, and create real life impact. And in a world where attention is currency, personal branding is the key to standing out and leading the conversation, right? So people no longer trust faceless institutions, especially when you think about everything that happened during the pandemic. The amount of ads that went out with like dramatic pianos talking about the fact that we're all in it together, or the amount of empty statements that were made by brands and leaders about how they want to help the world has led the entire landscape of audiences feeling like they can distrust the media, the noise that brands are saying, but they do connect with people. So going forward from 2025, it's not just going to be a nice to have, it's going to be a necessity, right? We're not going backwards, especially with AI technology coming and democratizing the production of products, etc. The world is just going to get a lot more noisier. So you're going to have to get in line and go with the tide. So, what is a personal brand? A personal brand is your signature. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's built on your skills, the work you put out, and the way you tell your story. It's not just about visibility, it's about impact, trust, and leaving a lasting impression on others. So, one thing that I learned from the comedian Kevin Hart, he said that the thing that, if you think about comedy, I bet not many people can name more than 10 comedians globally, right? There's not a lot of them. It's always the same comedians that have been around for a very long time because it's a tough art to master. But then the way you stand out as a comedian is by making sure that people leave the show, knowing a little bit more about you. And that's what Kevin Hart said, is instead of just telling jokes, make sure that you leave a little bit of your personality, that people have a lasting impression of who you are, and that's how you stand out. And that's exactly what I think about personal branding and in the business space. If we look at places like LinkedIn, we'll touch on that in a second. No, people want the information, but they also want to know about you. It's important to make sure that you understand how you leave a lasting impression so that people know a little bit about you when you're putting your content out there. So there are really three main stages when it comes to growing a personal brand. It's all about focusing on one channel. I think a lot of people spread themselves too thin really early on, but it's all about dominating one channel, having some real focus first. Developing a deeper relationship offline. I think a lot of people think that just having a community digitally is fine, but for me, that's a very low lift and non-committal community. You really know when you have a community when you can actually bring people together in real life. If you look at influencers like I Show Speed or creators like that, they basically shut down streets whenever they go anywhere. That's how you know that the brand is transcending just a digital experience. And if you look at a company like Gymshark as well, they're getting 5 to 10,000 people going to their pop-up stores, going to their events. Can you get people to leave their seats and actually go and see you wherever you go? That's how you can measure the real depth of what you're looking to do. But then finally, once you've conquered one platform, you're starting to get some in real life connection. How do you start to spread the impact across different channels? Now, these are the very top line. I'm about to go into each different point and get really specific. We have some real tangibles. So when it comes to focusing on one channel, there's a lot of slides. I'm going to go through this. It's about making sure that you don't spread yourself too thin. As soon as you make it really, really hard for you to execute, you're going to switch off, right? So to make it as easy and as focused as possible, focus on one channel that your audience is at and that naturally plays to your skills and what you feel comfortable to, right? It does help if you want to be very smart about it to go to a platform that other people are not there yet. If you do that, then the likelihood of you becoming the Kai Cenat, Mr. Beast, whatever you want to call it, of your platform becomes dramatically higher because there's less people occupying that space. So you go where your audience already is, go with the tide, but stand out. So a lot of the times on different platforms, there's already a language or a value proposition that everybody tends to gravitate to. It's important to be a student of the game and really want to understand what are people already engaging with on the platform and figure out how to create your version of that, right? A lot of the times when people try to think about content, they say, what do I want to say? And they push it onto the world. But really, what you should do is say, who is my audience? What are they engaging with? And not just from my competitors or creators in my space, but just in general. And what's my version of that? If you can create your version of that with your personality and from your POV, then you're more likely to go with the tide and just like an index fund, grow with the growth of the platform. But then alongside that 80% of your content, you have to inject your own personality, but based on the know-how of what version of your personality people want to hear more about. The third one is that timing matters. And also the days matter. I think a lot of the times people feel like posting something on a Monday versus posting something on a Friday is the same thing. You need to be able to make sure that you study when your audience is active online, and then also how the different times of the day influences the value that you're offering. So, for example, on LinkedIn, if you post something at 8 a.m. on a Monday versus something at 5 p.m. on a Friday, that will dramatically impact the performance of what your post is going to be, right? Because context matters. So, as well as knowing what your audience is, as well as knowing the universal hooks that are existing within the platform, you also have to know the timing conventions of when people are most receptive for the content that you want to bring out there. So it's all about understanding the overall context of the platform that you're going to be going into. And then once you do that, it's all about testing and learning. We talked about the fact that numbers don't lie. You have to monitor engagement and iterate as you go. It's actually not rocket science. I think the reason why a lot of people don't see value on socials is because they're just scared to post. They have almost like perfection syndrome, and they feel like if they don't get it right the first time, then what's the point? But really, when you realize the best come to those that iterate, not those that are perfect, then you become obsessed with the idea of monitoring and making adjustments on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. Basically, my LinkedIn strategy is just 5 years of iteration, right? Getting punched in the face, every single day and saying, why did I get punched in the face? And how do I not get punched in the face tomorrow? And the funny thing is about LinkedIn is that the cycles of what works changes on a bi-monthly basis. So if you're looking at what worked for you 6 months ago and you're not looking to remix it and adjust it to how it works today, you're just going to get left behind. It's really, really important to be monitoring what's working for you, what's working for other creators, what are people liking and engaging with. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. How can you collaborate with other creators? You're all in this together. I think a lot of creators like to be in their silos, but really, if you really want to grow beyond, especially on a platform like LinkedIn, it's super important to work with a team of other creators so that you're not just bouncing ideas off each other's, but you're also co-creating and engaging with each other. That only helps when it comes to amplifying how far your content travels. But then also build authority through consistency. As we mentioned, look at your Steph Currys, look at your Tom Brady's, look at your Michael Jordans, look at all those guys. And if you're in the UK side, you look at your Ronaldos, your Messis, they show up every day. They may not give a 10 out of 10 performance, but they show up, right? And the key to content creating or personal branding is showing up as frequently as you can, as much as you can, and adding as much value as you possibly can, right? So I post every day. My whole ethos is I'm going to give an idea every day. I'm going to give value every single day. And that's just become a system that I can't unbreak. And the goal is to start from saying, I'm going to give value once a week to twice a week to 3 times a week, and then eventually start showing up every day through a system, right? At the end of the day, it's not about motivation. Motivation is not going to get you through this. You have to build a system that outweighs your motivation, right? And that's the only way that you do the personal branding. We can do all of these stuff, but if you don't show up every day and iterate, then there's no point, right? So as soon as you know that the game of growing and compounding your growth is all about showing up, right? And generating that expectancy that you're going to show up. That's the basics of making sure that you can actually have the audacity to grow a personal brand in a world where everybody's trying to do the same thing, right? So I know I talk a lot about LinkedIn. Why am I so obsessed about LinkedIn? So there's only 1% of LinkedIn users that are posting regularly right now. And those 1% make up 100% of the attention. Do you know how crazy that is? So there's nearly 1 billion users on LinkedIn, and only 1% of that audience are creating. That means that there's so much space for people to be able to occupy that attention span. You see the same old creators all the time. And that's because everyone's scared to post. If you just become one of the 1% that say, I'm just going to post more regularly, already you're ahead of 99% of the people that are on the platform. That's insane, right? So the opportunity here is low competition, high visibility. Second, 61 million of the people on the platform are decision makers. They're the guys that control the budget, right? And 180 million are senior level employees that influence where that budget goes. So basically, you have an opportunity to connect directly to the source. This is calling up somebody back in the day at scale. And now, not only are you calling them, they already know who you are. And by the way, they've already been listening to your content for a very long time and they already built rapport with you. You're doing that at scale, right? So for anybody that's in the B2B space and still thinks there's a difference between B2B and B2C marketing, LinkedIn is the bridge of that, right? And you don't need that many customers if you're in the B2B space. You need 10, right? To raise a very successful business. Now imagine if you're driving 1 million views a week. What does that do for your business, right? Also, LinkedIn posts can reach 100 times more than the people that are connected to you. You don't have to have 1 million followers. You can have 1,000 followers and reach 1 million impressions. Those days are long behind us, right? So that's the opportunity. Also, although 99% of people don't post, 40% of them engage every day, right? So they may not be posting, but they are lurking, right? They're seeing your content, they're engaging with your content, they're sharing it with their friends, they're talking about it. So it's not that the 99% are just not on the platform. They are. They're actively engaging. So that's a really great opportunity for you to generate a nice following, an audience on there. And also, content shared by employees drives 8 times more engagement than from the company itself. So if you are an employee of a brand, you run a company, You're actually better off championing your LinkedIn and building your personal brand. Matter of fact, you're better off turning your salespeople into influencers, right? And that's actually something that we do right now. We help companies turn their sales teams into influencers because, well, that's the best way to go about it, right? Because if you understand what your ICP or your ideal customer audience likes, and you create that content, more of them will follow you, and then more people for your sales team to pick up a phone to. So it's one of the only platforms where the transition from engagement to sales is very, very clear, right? Especially if you get that mechanism right. So, but definitely if you're in the B2B space, I think it's a no-brainer having a personal brand, especially thinking about a platform like LinkedIn. So everybody likes to talk about the algorithm, right? So how do you encourage new people to come to the platform? How do you encourage people to engage with your content? How do you encourage dwell time so people actually stay on your content? All those things are ticks for platforms, right? So if you do those things, great. But I know that people like to get tactical. I'm going to dive into the algorithm to demystify some myths. So really, when you post something on LinkedIn, LinkedIn are trying to make sure that they filter the kind of content that goes viral on the platform, right? And they do it by looking at three main things. They look at the general quality of the post, right? They don't want spam. They don't want things that just like make the platform or the feed look ugly. They want to make sure that there's a general like minimum requirement when it comes to the quality of the post that you put out, right? So that will go through AI. The next, it's all about like engagement testing. So what they'll do is they'll put your content in front of a couple of people in your following to see how it performs from a engagement ratio perspective, right? And usually the golden hour, if you will, of LinkedIn is the first hour, right? So what happens in your first hour defines how far it will travel, because that's when the algorithm is putting your content in front of a couple of people to see whether they engage with it and whether it's going to be value for other people. And then once you pass that test, it starts to look at network relevance, right? Who is this value to? And let's put it in front of more of those people, right? And that's how your content travels, right? So if you have a viral post, the bulk of your engagement will happen after the first hour, but then the first hour defines whether you even get out the blocks at all, right? So it's really, really important to make sure. That's why when people try to build their brands or advertise their businesses with sales-based messaging, it's just not going to get past these filters. They're going to say, well, this is not going to be valuable to everybody else trying to sell to people. You're better off finding things that will be valuable to a wider audience. And then when they engage, you sell to them on the back end, right? And that's the thing that people are not taking into consideration. So things to avoid: spammy behavior, right? Like tagging unrelated individuals is actually do like human testing to see whether you actually do that, right? Low quality content, the more errors, the higher likelihood that the content is going to be flagged, right? Excessive hashtags or things like that, just make sure you look at it, but also posting too frequently, right? If you post more than one post in a 12-hour lifespan, that's just going to impact how far your account's going to go. So that's why I say I post once a day. It's not for, although it sounds very, very simple, it's because I understand that there's no point posting more than twice because you're just going to cannibalize yourself. It almost gives your account a cap as to how many posts you can actually put out or the total number of reach you can put out at any given day. So you're better off posting as early as you can to give yourself enough of a lifespan to grow and let your post breathe. So let's go into more of the basics as well. So before we start to go into like what content you should be creating, there's certain what I like to call own goals that people do. That an own goal is when you score in your own net, right? For those that like soccer. So effectively, these are like some common practices that you need to do immediately. That if you're not doing is already like making sure that you're not even going to capitalize on any of this stuff, right? So first and foremost, switch to creator mode, right? Because then it starts to recognize you as an authority and that you're there to add value and to categorize you in a different way. Optimize your profile for discovery, right? Make sure that it's clear, make sure it's easy to understand, make sure that people know your statement. People need to know what value prop that you provide, right? Because that all matters. Enable follower mode because you don't want everybody to connect with you, but you want more people to follow you. So make sure that you enable that. Otherwise, you're preventing yourself from building a community. So that's one of the things that you do right away. Pin your best content. There's the feature page. If you have a post that does very well, instead of it just disappearing in the ether, put it on your feature page so people know some of the stuff that you've done before, right? So it's super, super important to make sure that you treat your page as a landing page so that when people see your piece of content outside and click on your profile, you know exactly what you offer, they know exactly what value you've put out there, and then you know that you're somebody worth following, right? Super, super important. You don't have a lot of time to get a second, first impression. Post with purpose. Like, don't just put BAU posts out there. Try to make sure that you have in mind who's this going to be of value to, right? Even better if you have one audience in mind and you find three ways that you can add value to them, right? Those are your three different content strands. I think a lot of people over engineer and complicate it, right? It's just as simple as who do I want to serve and how do I add value to their life? And these are the three ways I'm going to do it. And you also have to engage like a creator. And for people talk about things like networking, and a lot of the times people say, I don't like to network, but you're going to have to. So on LinkedIn, you're going to have to get out of your profile, find other creators in your space, and engage with them, right? And even better, I try to challenge people to hijack their top comments. Can you go to other creators' pages and try to outvalue them in the comment section? That's a perfect way to drive people back to your play, right?
I'm gonna hop in quick because there's a pertinent comment Richard was saying. So don't repost content from other people. That seems antisocial.
No, well, so what I always say about reposting content from other people, LinkedIn has gone into a very interesting space where plagiarism is on the high, right?
Mm.
And people are not crediting where the sources come from, right? But then also, the algorithm on LinkedIn is hot on when the same post starts to travel so much, it actually reduces your engagement, right? Unless you add a different perspective or a different spin to it, right? So if you're gonna repost somebody's piece of content, at least add a different perspective to it. It's like sampling in music. You're
So
not just
don't
gonna
just do the repost.
reposts don't work. Like reposts on LinkedIn, actually, if a friend of you says, "Can you please reshare my post on LinkedIn?" You're better off dropping a comment and a like.
Mm. Mm.
Reshares actually don't travel that much. We've done a lot of analytics on people's best performing content versus the worst performing content, and reshares just don't travel at all.
So is it even worth asking people to share your content?
It's great to reshare for the original creator to up the content, but you are not yourself going to see the content increasing. It's all the value is going to go to the original creator.
Gotcha.
So if you repost somebody else on your profile, you're not going to get the engagement. It's all going to go to the original creator, right?
Interesting. But it can, if you repost with your thoughts and you had
Yeah,
love it.
you're better off creating a whole new post with that post in it and tagging the person. If you just reshare the
Ah,
original post, there's no point, right? It's a glitch in
yeah.
the LinkedIn algorithm. You're better off just putting the same post, putting it up, writing your perspective in the caption, and then atting or putting like what I do, a light bulb and the person that you got it from and crediting them that way.
Not even using the repost with thoughts feature.
I'm just telling you guys, it's a waste of time. It's been put in there to appease us, to make it feel like it's actually a way for us to grow. But then actually from a reach perspective, statistically, reshares don't travel.
It just keeps it, yeah, it just keeps us on the platform feeling like we're doing. On this point, Linda was also saying, so should you reshare your own posts later in the day? A
Well, I
little,
don't for
yeah.
a little bit, but I just much prefer liking and engaging on my own comment section, responding to everybody.
Hmm.
Liking likes actually works a lot better, right? Likes and comments and the frequency in which or the speed in which you comment back to people actually works better at the resharing functionality because it notifies everybody that follows you that you're engaging with something useful.
So just to summarize for my brain, like if you're spending that 15 minutes later in the day on LinkedIn and you're not writing something net new, you should be in the comments or liking or engaging. Yeah.
You could even have sub posts on your comment section to continue the journey if you want. I see some creators
Mm.
do this, right? So not only do they take a previous post that has worked before, put it in the comment section, and then they'll put it in there to attract people to the post itself.
Oh, cool.
Hey,
Clear
it's
that
all the
real.
hacks. I hope nobody from LinkedIn's here because I'm giving out all the gems, right? So just to get yourselves around it. But the reposts are great for the creator. So for example, if you have a company page and you have people that work for the company to repost, it'll help boost that post 100%. But you as the person reposting will not actually see a lot of that value, right?
Mm,
It'll just increase the visibility of the previous post.
mm. Cool. Okay.
All
I think
right.
a few people were like, "Oh, that's new."
Oh yes. Hey,
Yeah.
that's just, I'm just saying. But so obviously we talked about the basics, and now when it comes to like building a personal brand, I think there's this thing that I see a lot that people try to be something to everybody. But the most important thing is to be clear about who you are. It's a very noisy space, right? And a lot of people try to make sure that they almost like people either should either love you or hate you, but they should do nothing. But it's at least know what value proposition you provide, right? And here's a creator that is known as the number one person, the number one creator in the sports racing space. She, I think, on the favicon list, she's second after Lewis Hamilton. So she talks about motorsports. And it helps that she's the only female in the space that's talking about it at that magnitude as well. So she has a differentiator as well, right? But now she's become the top creator across LinkedIn, which is phenomenal. And she's known for her value to the motorsport space, right? So people know her for that. They know her style for that. She gets talks for that, which is amazing, right? And this is based on just following a very simple formula, which is 1 second. This is based on following a very simple formula, which is I help this specific people achieve this specific results through this specific unique way. If you can summarize your value proposition into something as simple as that, just like the line that I said before, then you know exactly what your value prop is, right? Whereas instead, I think people take too much time to just say, okay, what value is everybody else adding? I'm going to take a little bit of everybody's value prop, but then I don't actually stand for anything. What you should do is use all of that stuff for inspiration, but link it back to what your anchor is going to be, right? So I help people and brands grow through community-driven marketing. That's what I do, right? So that explains why I'm on this call. That explains why I have the business that I have. That explains everything that I do is based on that anchor point. And it's important for you guys to make sure that you do that, right? And also, when it comes to like creating content, use the 80-20 rule, right? It's like using my skills to add value to other people's life, but then 20% is injecting my own personality in as well, right? So if you see my content, I always approach it with my tone of voice. And when people meet me, they say that this your posts actually sound like you. I'm not trying to act smarter than I am. I'm not trying to pretend that I'm somebody that I'm not, right? I add insightful pieces of information, but I inject my personality in there. So it's important to make sure that, especially when you're on a platform like LinkedIn, people are looking for an edge, right? Most people on LinkedIn are people in offices or business people that don't have time, right? So actually, you're better off going for a sound off first approach with statements that gets people hooked in, and then you deliver on your value prop because that's what people want. They want an edge, right? And if you see yourself as a servant of other people as opposed to it being all about you, then you're more likely to create content that travels. I always tell people a chef that only cooks their favorite dish has an empty restaurant. A DJ that only plays their favorite tracks has an empty club. You're supposed to make sure that you're playing for your audience, right? Super, super important from a mentality standpoint. But it has to be aligned with what your value proposition actually is. A very simple one that people ignore is readability, right? As well as making sure that you're injecting your personality, you know exactly who you are. People's posts sometimes just have like a lot of words on it, right? I do something as simple as have two break lines in between content, so it's very easy for people to understand and read, right? I think that people forget that you're reading things on mobile. You have to take into consideration the reading experience, right? Breaking up statements with like points where you want to emphasize, almost like for dramatic effect. Being a bit of a writer, right? To ensure that you actually have a great reading experience. I think if people underestimate that it's not just about the knowledge that you give, it's about how easy it is to consume, right? And also find your gap. What are all the creators doing? And what are you doing that's different and unique to you? So you should always be chasing What is the thing that makes me different to all the other creators, right? And if you're not doing that, you're just going to be in a sea of creators. I have my hat. I like to make people laugh. And I think my early posts as part of the campaign that brought the laughing emoji to LinkedIn because my thing was everybody's so uptight. I'm just going to make people feel lighthearted and laugh, but they're going to learn something along the way, right? So you should always have your here are the points to your individuality and how do I do that better than anybody else? Super, super important. Otherwise, you're just a page with a lot of followers. You're not a brand. And bottom line is, it's not. Yeah, like being yourself is not just nice, right? It's how you stand out. But then you have to realize the part of yourself that matches for the audience you're going to try to attract. And on LinkedIn, you have to figure out what side of you that you want to double down on. Like people don't care about what I ate last night on LinkedIn. They probably do on IG stories, right? But on LinkedIn, they like to hear about how I help people build communities, how I help people be greater leaders, how I help people train and manage team members. That's the side of me that they want to know. So you have to make sure that you contextualize the side of you that people want to know on that platform and you double down on it in a way that makes you very, very unique, right? Secondly, like I said, show up regularly, right? Here's another creator that basically has just been around for a very, very long time, just showing up every single day with posts and value and making sure that people, when they hop onto the platform, he basically hijacks the feed. So the goal should always be to get to a point where you can show up every single day, right? You have to try to join the 1% because I think that the upside of that is so massive for everybody, right? I have a 3-3-1 approach, right? Which is I say, okay, what are my three value driven posts that selfishly I'm going to give out to people for them to feel like this is very, very valuable? What are my three posts that are very engagement led based on things that have worked for me before, things that work for other creators, et cetera, et cetera? And what's my one ask, right? What's my one thing that I'm going to ask people, right, that week? And I make sure that it's something that is like of value to them, right? Or like try my free course, come over to my Teachable workshop, whatever that's going to be. So I'm only going to ask people for something once a week. I'm going to give 6 times a week, right? But in different forms. If you maintain that ratio and you do that week in and week out, then not only are you going to be able to grow your audience, but you're also going to be able to drive an ROI, right? The issue is a lot of people probably have it the other way around where they ask 3 times or 6 times, right? And they realize, well, my news doesn't travel. That's because you keep selling to everybody all the time. You're not even making it past the algorithm. So you're better off adding value up front. And then what will happen is your people that follow you will see the post that is your ask. And if you're focusing on content that actually resonates with the right audience, you're more likely to generate an ROI from that perspective. Be obsessed with the data, follow what works. It's not just about posting aimlessly, iterate, look at the numbers. What's worked for me before? Why has it worked? Use the comment section to contextualize and trial again. You're basically a scientist running experiments, right? Like I think a lot of people think that this is about creativity. No, this is a science, right? There is the art of understanding what content resonates, but most of it is a science and you can learn it if you just iterate on yourself. And sometimes there'll be some content that everybody else posts, but for some reason seems to work for you and not for anyone else. That's where your personality kicks in, right? That's what personal branding is, right? You generate an authority or an aura in 2025, is what people like to say. That means that whenever you say something, people are willing to listen because you've given them so much value up front, right? So you want to get into that stage that whenever you say something, people stop and listen and consume. And even if people try to copy you, they're not going to have the same results. And then obviously, like I said, consistency beats perfection. System beats motivation, right? So try to show up as regularly as you can. But if you really want to get to the top of this, build a system that allows you to show up every day on somebody's feed. Super important. Give more than you take, right? Jab, 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 right hook. I think I've been talking about this the whole way through, right? If you give more than you take, then you'll be in a really, really good place, right? Like, and it's not just about giving in your posts, it's about going on to other, you should have a hit list of like 20 accounts that are trying to resonate with the same people. And you're in that comment section every day, right? listening to what they've said and adding your POV and trying to get top comment with the most engagement in the comment section. Super important. You should find the pages that are trying to resonate with your audience and being in there too, right? Like people talk about the nice guy finishes last. That's not the case in the world of personal branding. The more visible you are, the more value you seem to be adding, the more out of your ecosystem that you are, the more likely you are to drive people back to your page, right? Super, super important. Now, what I always say is that it goes down in the DMs, right? It's very simple how we were able to generate a lot of traction to our agency using my personal brand. And by the way, if you look at my page, I don't even talk about butterfly effect, right? I recognize that the people that I'm trying to attract is decision makers and leaders. So what does my content focus on? Leaders, right? Because I know that through osmosis, they're going to follow me. And then I'm just going to look and say, okay, which of the leaders actually fits my customer profile? And once they engage with me enough, I'm going to DM them. And the cool thing about DMing is if you DM somebody and they respond, they're likely to see your posts going forward. If you do all the relationship building on the front end, but you do all your selling and deeper connection on the back end, that's the winning formula to ensure that you're not overselling at face value. You're only focusing on the people that have engaged and that build rapport with you, which is super, super important. Increase that dwell time from increasing the length of your captions to make sure that you're adding like utmost value, to using carousels to make sure that you're actually taking people on a journey. Just even using video, the big advantage of video is it keeps you on the post for as long as possible. LinkedIn overemphasizes on dwell time. Who are people that are keeping people on the post for as long as possible, right? If you have posts that people are engaging in a non-committal way, then they're just doom scrolling, then that's not deep enough for the algorithm to favor you. But if you're somebody that people are going to their page and spending time on their page and on their post, you're more likely to be favored whenever you hit those green ticks on the algorithm checklist, right? So trying to create posts that increases dwell time is super, super important, right? So the bottom line of this is generosity creates a cycle of goodwill that grows the brand naturally, right? So for you to be able to leverage on the organic nature of social, especially on LinkedIn, then your content has to travel beyond where you push it. So other people have to feel like it's valuable to somebody else that they know. And a sales message directly from your brand is not going to be something that people are going to share. But if your brand unlocks a problem that a lot of people feel, and you can do that in a way that feels like it's value add, now that's going to travel. Or the first thing people are going to do is say, who is the creator? Where do they work? What do they do? Right? So you're basically casting out a net and you're pulling people back into your profile, which is why optimizing your account is super, super important, because you make it easy for when people land on your page to know exactly what it is that you do. All right. So what's the ROI? So I also created a very simple framework, and I swear to you, this is what helped us generate £2 million of sales in our first year working with the likes of Netflix, Bumble, Cheesecake Factory. How I'm able to work with people like Teachable and like all these different brands is because I follow this simple framework, right? So first, I post content that people care about, right? If you want to know what content people care about, let's say, for example, you're trying to reach out to CFOs. Go on LinkedIn, type in CFO, take 20 people that list up, look at their profiles, go to their reactions, see what they're engaging with. Even better, see what's the highest engaging thing of the thing that they're engaging with and put that in your content matrix. Post that, your own version of that. That's more likely going to attract CFOs, right? Because that's the way the algorithm works, right? It's like people that seem to have this background love this post. So if you put it out and you go past the first golden hour, it'll categorize you as a person that adds value to that audience and it'll serve you to more of that audience, right? So it's a very manual mechanism. Just go to people's reaction posts and see what they're engaging with. It's the only platform that gives you a lot. Like I remember when Instagram used to tell you that your friend liked this. It doesn't do that anymore. LinkedIn literally tells you what people are reacting to. And if you are eager and curious enough to look at who your target audience or what your target audience is engaging with, you can create a content matrix that allows you to go with the tide, right? So you start there. Then you add your personal stories to that. You ask people questions. You make sure that you add your 20% value on the top of that and you just keep it real, right? I say here, I'm being nice. I say 3 to 5 times a week. Really should be trying to go for every day, right? And saying, okay, my Monday motivation post versus on Sunday, I know people at 6 p.m. I've just finished their weekend. They're thinking about the week that they're going into and are worried about whether they're making the right decisions in life, right? So it's a different mind frame. So if you can start to almost like a reason why I didn't like scheduling posts is because it wasn't working because I wasn't feeling how I would feel on a Wednesday. If you schedule a post for a particular day, they ask yourself, how would I feel on this day and on this time? And therefore, how would other people feel on this day and this time? And does my content contextually make sense for that day and that time? That all matters, right? So a Sunday post is different to a Wednesday post. If you ask yourself those questions, you're more likely to thrive from scheduling posts too. See who's paying attention, who's looking at your profile, who's engaging with you, like, and see which names are repeating themselves that follow your consumer. Don't just hit up somebody after they've done it once. If you're seeing the same people engage more than once, then it's likelihood that they know who you are. So when you reach out to them, they'll actually be shocked that you even noticed them, right? So look at who's engaging. That's really, really important. Every week I look back and say, okay, who's engaged? The good thing about LinkedIn, it can even categorize the profile views that you get by interesting profiles or senior titles, right? So if you do that and your goal is to just like cast a fishing net in the week and then you look back and see which fish you caught, you can start to put them on a scoreboard and see who keeps engaging. And once they engage more than once, even 3 times, then you reach out to them and say, hey, let's grab a coffee, let's chat. Start with a casual chat, right? With my profile, let's have a chat and talk about, and whatever the post might need to be, it could be great ways to expand that conversation, right? Especially if they follow you. If you're creating content that are valuable and somebody follows you, that's even better. That's like they're buying you a drink. If you go back to them and start a conversation off the back, that's a really good place to be. Then your goal in that conversation is to find exactly what their pain points are. You don't sell from the start. You speak, you bond, you get a connection, then you find out what their challenges are. And hopefully, if you got your audience right, and if the value proposition of what you add or what you're selling is actually useful to people, you're more likely to find a way that you can intersect or you can introduce your product to support in that region. But it starts by just like selflessly asking them what the challenges are, what they're going through, right? And then if something feels natural, introducing what it is that you have to relieve that pain. And then if you see that there's a thing that works, just keep doing it, right? Just do what works. If you see there's something broke in the chain, then fix the chain, change your messaging. If you feel like, actually, I got them all the way through to the call, but I didn't close because I didn't get that, I didn't ask the right question, that's a good place to be, right? Once you follow that model of posting regularly, seeing who posts,
Oh,
amazing.
can still hear you, but I lost
Yeah,
your
it's
go
okay.
there.
All right, cool. So the good thing about this is it creates a system where you can see where the issue lied, right? Are we posting every day? Yes. Are the right people engaging on our post? Yes. Have we reached out to a few of them and have we got them to engage back? Yes. Have we hopped on a call with them and then something happened over there? Yes. If it does and it closes, do more of that. Use that chain more. If it falls anywhere through, amend it, make it better, right? So it allows you to systemize that whole entire process. We're actually working on creating a tech product that does this all, but this will come later down the line, right? But effectively, for now, I'm giving you the manual framework to be able to do this by yourselves. And you can do this today. So focusing on one channel and really focusing on a platform like LinkedIn to get to the real depths of it. But then once you do that, it's all about making sure that you build a real world connection. It's important to turn those engagements into real conversations, right? Just having these digital hoo-ha relationships doesn't work. How can you go from having people that's a liker or an engager to having actually understanding the human behind it, right? And especially in the B2B space, that scales. It's important to see how you can hop on a call with people, build relationships, have coffees with people that are engaging with you. Use LinkedIn to drive meetups. There's so many creators right now that are going on to having meetups, doing things like this, having knowledge shares, having spaces where they bring the community together. It's important to think about how you do that. Leverage things like having your own newsletter, right? Your own Teachable masterclass, right? How can you go in greater depth so that you use your content on LinkedIn as more of a teaser, but then you have a different destination when you add the value in extended mode. It's almost like the director's cut of your LinkedIn page. Showcase your IRL experiences. So if you're going to meet up with people on real life, why don't you just like document that and create FOMO for the rest of your audience, right? It's important to, what I like to say, use IRL to disrupt URL, right? How can you do things in real life that's relevant to your LinkedIn audience? And then how do you showcase how you actually treat people that choose to follow you on your journey? Super, super important. And also create content that sparks conversation offline. How can you create those water cooler moments that gets people speaking about you, not just digitally, right? So you're breaking through the noise. But then also showcase what's happening behind the scenes. Who's the human behind the LinkedIn posts, right? So people know that you're not just a digital character, which is super, super important. Like creating, I know that there's like a statement on social when people say, are you rich in real life, right? This is like, are you actually a personality in real life? Are you just useful? Or do you also have a personality and a brand, right? And I think a lot of people that are creating content right now are just useful, but they're not creating a brand. If you want to create a brand, you have to make sure that people actually know the whole element of you, right? Not just what you post. But obviously, it's important to show the side of you that's still relevant to the audience. So just putting that out there. So now, once you've conquered LinkedIn or the one platform, you started to get depth outside of just the digital experience. Here's how you spread your posts, your influence across different platforms. So side note, does anybody remember that Dolly Parton meme that she put out where she basically said, get your
Yeah.
woman that can do all? This is me on LinkedIn. This is me on Facebook. This is me on Instagram. This is me on Tinder. If one person is four different personalities on four different platforms, then having a one size fits all strategy is not going to work.
I remember this.
Yeah. But what I mean by that is you're still you, but there's a different side of you depending on the platform that you're in and depending on what people on the platform want, right? So you still have to define who you are, but then you say, what is me on LinkedIn versus me on Instagram, right? That is relevant to what the audience wants. And once you've conquered the one platform, it's important for you to say, okay, what's the next natural step that I can create content every day, right? So you give each channel a purpose and you start with the one that's like the easiest one to do next, right? So you have to be very strategic about it. You can use LinkedIn as your anchor. And because that's probably the place or whatever your anchor platform is, the place where you're going to generate the most amount of traction, you can then say, okay, how do I turn this piece of content into something that's valuable for people on another platform? So what we used to do at Gymshark is use X as the testing ground for narratives. We'll put it out, we'll see what sticks, and we might turn it into a skit for TikTok. We won't use the same content, but we'll take the essence of what it says and we'll use that somewhere else. So it's not just about reposting stuff from one platform to the other. It's about taking the essence of why it works and remixing it to work on another platform. Just super, super important. So the same person going from Facebook to Instagram literally changes the mindset that they go into the platform with. They're a completely different person in a different mind frame, right? So it's important for you to make sure that you're aligned with the mind frame that they're on that platform. Like I said, it's important to make discovery effortless. So on your anchor platform, showcase that you are on other platforms. So if people want to vibe with you in that way on that platform, they can see that, right? But then also, like I said, you obviously have to make sure that if you're going to commit to a new platform, that you show up consistently, right? But it can't be identically. You have to give people a reason to follow. There's no point creating two pages where you're saying the same stuff and attracting the same audience. Stay to one, right? I think it's super important.
Can I ask a quick question here? Because I just see a lot of people, especially, I'm curious how many people in the audience are in this place. Like, you're not a total beginner. You've been doing this for a bit. You've grown a bit of an audience. maybe even made some money through partnerships or your own products or stuff. But I see a lot of people get really concerned with like this stage of like
Yeah,
stretching outside of the one platform.
yeah.
Do you have just like a when is the right time to do
Well,
this?
I think the right time is when you can step into a new platform, be able to deliver content competitively every day without detrimenting your original platform.
So the one
If you
has to
can,
be, you've just got that other muscle going.
yeah. So
Yeah.
basically, when you can literally be able to deliver what is required of the second platform without hurting your first platform. Some people have the resources to do that from the jump, right? But really, the big thing about focusing on one channel, yes, it effectively makes sense, but it's just like way harder to try to figure out two platforms at the same time. It's so
Mm,
hard, right?
yeah.
And yet you're trying to get yourself to split your personality twice at the same time.
Yeah.
That's like being an actor and method acting while you're being yourself. Really, really difficult, right?
Yeah.
It's really difficult, right? It's more like what's going to give you the best likelihood of winning, and focus wins all the time, right? So you focus on one, you build a system that allows you, and then you figure out the next one, right? And it allows you to get enough depth to even launch the second platform with a good space, because some people will follow you initially, but then you build a whole new world, right? And that just works so much better than trying to resonate with like two completely different audiences all at the same time.
I'm gonna ask one more question, then I know we got a bunch of other people's questions and you're still going, so I don't want to take up too much time. But like, is it fair to say, whatever your primary platform is, you should be making money there
Oh
before you
yeah,
go do this?
look at Kai Cenat. His primary platform is Twitch. He makes all his money on Twitch. He's on IG, he's on everywhere else, but you always have to look at home market. When you are a creator, just like if you are a brand and your home market is the United States or your home market is the UK, you need to be winning there. I'll give you an example. Drake's first album went big in America, but he went back to Toronto to make sure he got Canada on his side, because it's better to move as a movement, right,
Hmm.
than as an individual. So if you build your community on home market, you should dominate there. That's what pays for the bills. That's where your home market is. And then you start to experiment outside of home market.
That's what I was trying to get to because I see a lot of people try and scale before they've actually owned anything. Yeah.
You run out of steam. You run out of steam. The content game changes every single day. Unless you are like people like Tima Amu that have like a team of 5 people that are doing their content for them, it's very, very difficult. It's
Yeah.
difficult to do it, right? So if you're a one-person army, it's important to make sure that you preserve your energy. Lasting, like the top YouTubers have just outlasted everybody,
Yeah.
right? They just keep showing up, right? That's all it is. And you have to pick a platform that you're going to keep showing up in.
So, thank you.
Okay. And the lastly, drive action, not just awareness. Awareness is cute, but can you actually get people to do something? It's important to make sure that if you're going to go on a platform, get people to do something. So summarize before we go into Q&A. If you want to build your personal brand, first and foremost, make yourself easy to discover. And also don't hurt yourself when it comes to your own growth. So what are the basics? Your creator modes, refining your profile, making sure that you see your profile as a landing page for people to get to know who you are and what value you have to add, right? Make sure that you go with the tide, but stand out. So understand what people are posting on the platform that you're in, whether that be your competitors, other creators, or just general people on the platform. What are they engaging with? What are they liking? What are they talking about? And get involved in the conversation. You can't be going with your ball to like the side and saying, I'm going to have my own conversation over here. No one's going to join you. For you to have the authority to have your own conversation, you must first join the conversation of others, right? Super important. Leverage collaboration, try to work with as many creators as you can. Start with one that will listen to you, and then try to find an army of people that you're co-creating with. If you remember the days of Vine, all those creators still create together today, right? They're all a massive unit. They're all engaging on each other's posts, seeing each other in meetups, doing brand deals together. find your own pack of creators that you can create with, especially those that are on the same journey as you, and go as a movement. Once you actually master the depth of one platform, spread across to other channels, find the one that's like the easiest for you to transcend into and add a completely different value proposition. Then it's also about making sure that you master real world connections, because you can't just be big digitally, you have to be big in real life. But then it's important to make sure that you track, adapt, and refine. It's all about iterations. You're going to get it wrong the first couple of weeks, first couple of months. But if you iterate every single time, you try to make those minor adjustments, you will win the game. It's been 5 years of iteration for myself, and I still iterate till today. I had a terrible week on LinkedIn last week. So basically, it never stops. And that's the fun game about it, right? Is that every week is different, every day is different, and it's all a learning process. But if you out iterate everybody else and you keep your ears to the ground to what's happening, you'll become a top creator and you'll become the top brand, right? So I'm going to stop speaking for a little bit. I'm going to take some questions. I know we went over a little bit. I'll put my LinkedIn handle over here for anybody that would like to follow me, engage with me, chop it up a little bit more. We can have some coffee, virtual coffees, etc., etc. Talk a little bit more about it. But that's me.